Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And today with me is Mike. Mike, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on?
Yeah, hi, Dr. Gleb. Thanks for having us on. Definitely excited to share what we're up to. But I'm the CEO for a company called Trelliswork. We're based in the Seattle area, and we are building a team operating platform for distributed work. We think of it as a place where managers can better orchestrate their everyday work, everything from better meeting agendas to one-on-ones to helping to orchestrate the work that managers do every day to keep teams better aligned, focused, and accountable. And that's a space that a lot of companies are really struggling with today, especially as we think about kind of how do we rethink how to work in an environment now where everything is dispersed and we have distributed as kind of a main way that we think about organizing our time together. And that's where we are today.
Now, you've been working with clients extensively. I'm sure you've been looking at the market. What are the biggest problems that companies are facing in this space, in the space of flexible work?
Yeah, it's interesting, obviously, looking at all the I'd say in some cases, there's just a lot of noise happening around the space. There's any number of problems. I don't think that we have nailed distributed and flexible work yet, for sure. There's still a lot that we need to do to help companies to adapt and teams to better operate in that environment. I think there's two things that come to mind for me that definitely are still challenges. And one of them is I couch it really in this idea of kind of a transparency gap that we have. And what I mean by that is it's kind of from two different perspectives. One is if you are a leadership team today and you're trying to wrestle with really what is the right way to either enable my teams or how do I operate in this kind of environment, you have this kind of challenge in that because we don't see work anymore in person, you have this kind of misalignment of, I think, what we otherwise take as physical proximity as a sign of productivity, which oftentimes is not always true in some cases, right? And on the flip side, if you're a manager who is trying to go just every day figure out how to go keep kind of both worlds of managing your people and managing work in a distributed environment moving forward, the problem there is that you're trying to act with a level of autonomy and empowerment to keep your teams moving forward and engaged. But if you're getting mandates to come back in the office, in some cases, it actually is a big sign of a lack of trust. And so you have this basically trust balance problem, I'd say, which is that because we can't easily see the work that is happening anymore, we kind of misassociate physical presence again with that productivity. I think managers have a lot more work on their shoulders to help leadership see that. Look, you have to remember, like 2.5 years ago, we had a whole phase where we said, guess what? Remote work is more productive than we were in person. And we very quickly got amnesia in the last year or so, it feels like. And now we're back to that's no longer productive. But I think managers have a lot of work to figure out how you actually help showcase all the things that are being done really, really well. And that doesn't happen for free. And so there's a little bit of a different alignment there on how to spend your time. The second aspect, I'd say, kind of quickly there is just there's also just a lack of structure, and I'd say more specifically operating structure. Right now, if you're operating a company with a flexible workplace environment, you oftentimes just don't have much structure for how those teams actually run every day, and you don't have relying on those managers to put that in place. But if you don't make time and schedule time for one-on-ones and schedule time for collaboration sessions, they don't happen. And not all work can happen asynchronously. That's a giant benefit we get in a remote and flexible workplace, but you still need to come together as a team regularly. And you still need to think about all the positive dynamics of building a team and actually investing in culture. And so I think that's a big part of this. That's a challenge, which is that we actually need to make that stuff easier. The work of doing that as a manager right now falls on your shoulders as a manager. And again, we got to think differently about making that easier.
Yeah, and this is definitely a huge problem. I've seen, so I helped over 24 companies by now figure out their hybrid, flexible work schedules, going back to the office, whatever they've wanted to do. And the trust is a major issue, which we've solved through structure. So linking those two issues, the trust and the structure, one way that I found works really well is to have in those one-on-ones, good managers already have one-on-ones regularly every week or every 2 weeks with their employees, with their team members. So instead of just simply doing a one-on-one, to have a performance management element where you set 3 to 5 goals for the week or 2 weeks And then at the next one-on-one, you see, did you achieve those goals? What kind of problems did you encounter? How can you solve those problems better? And what would be the case for the goals for the next one-on-one in a week or 2 weeks? So there's kind of a linkage in there, I feel. What have you seen about structures that help address this transparency gap?
Well, I mean, the one thing that we hear most often right now, and we see is like there's often the question of just are your teams even doing one-on-ones, right? I mean, so like back to the structure again, right? Which is like there's just a basic, almost like a binary of are you doing the things that you need to do anyways to even have that time with your individuals in a one-on-one space? And just knowing that those are or not happening in and of itself is a huge differentiator of just whether or not you've actually have kind of healthy team culture happening. But yeah, there's definitely a linkage that we see around just you can't overestimate, I think, the value that comes from regular one-on-one time with individuals, because so much of the way that people operate is it's not all one size fits all, right? So some people might do really well in a team environment where it's a group meeting space, but some people are very, very much more a personality where they want that individual time with a manager. And so in some cases, if you don't have that time with that person one-on-one, you might never find out that they were misaligned or didn't actually understand the goal, right? So that's a big part where, yeah, I do like your comment of like linking that specifically to structure in the sense that actually is partly what builds trust, because that's also those one-on-ones are where you do build individual relational trust. So yeah, spot on.
In terms of trust, I think that there's something I see about a mentality that dates back to the factory worker, this idea that knowledge workers are just like factory workers. They produce things in a standard manner. But knowledge workers are not factory workers. They don't do the same repetitive tasks. If so, their work would be outsourced to AI. They do much more creative, innovative tasks. And it's the idea that you can simply monitor and ensure creativity, ensure innovation, seems a little bit backward to me. So what are you seeing about ways of actually facilitating innovation, which we have a lot of research and practice showing that autonomy is really important for innovation, which would seem like you would need to give people trust, and if you give them some autonomy. What are your thoughts about the specific productivity associated with innovation in this remote hybrid work environment?
Yeah, I think it's a good comparison actually. Back to just kind of factory work, and you're right, it's very different work. I mean, obviously, just the nature of the fact that so much of today's knowledge work is cross-functional and distributed in nature, not just physically and geographically, but also distributed in the sense that we work with teams where it might be a product team interfacing with a design team, interfacing with an engineering team, interfacing with a marketing manager, and like that work doesn't necessarily benefit from the same types of advantages you got from being in person as much as you need better ways to collaborate and share information cleanly. So what I would say is key in this space for us is like we talk a lot about structured collaboration is what's missing. I mean, if we've gone into this environment now where all of our context is everywhere, it's all scattered vertically across different surfaces, whether it's general purpose Google Docs or your email or a Slack channel, our ability to just find that information when you're coming together as a team to do innovation and collaboration, like we're hindered by that ability to actually bring the right context together. So that's, again, we talk a lot about this idea that there's just an operational context layer missing right now, especially in distributed work. And it's an enabler to that same level of innovation and collaboration that you want to go in, I'd say, encourage. And when it's nothing but a scavenger hunt trying to go find everything, it's non-value added busy work to try to go just find the data. So that's a big part where I think more of those collaboration surfaces that have an essence of structure and connectivity, so that it's not so hard to go find what you need when your teams get together, is important.
I find that to build on what you're saying, which I think is very insightful, I think what I find is that organizations don't really even think that this is something necessary. They don't realize that you can't use the same old ways of managing in a new environment, in a remote environment, in a hybrid environment. You need a whole new playbook. You need a whole new structure. You need new policies, new approaches, new systems, new processes. So what are your thoughts and what have you observed about better practices, best practices in having structured collaboration, having a playbook for remote work, for hybrid work?
Yeah, well, it's similar to maybe the other comment on one-on-ones, which is, having a playbook is a giant step in the right direction, right? There are some really great companies that, I mean, are definitely on the radar that I've seen them in the last couple of years that do a really, really good job being more forward thinking around, here is the handbook for remote work, and this is how we're expecting teams to go operate. The challenge that I think comes with playbooks in themselves is that they're not enough on their own, right? So you actually need,
Sure.
it's a great step to basically sit down and actually document, how do we work around here? That's a huge thing that matters a ton right now for everything from building trust to building high trust teams to all the things around just knowing what it's like to actually be a team and work together. That's a huge part of this. The thing though that I don't think we tend to go far enough with a lot of times is you still have to put those into practice. And like, so the handbook is great and the playbook is great, but we have to remember that managers only have really general purpose tools right now at their disposal that don't do enough to actually operationalize these things. And so, you'll start your day in a one-on-one with somebody, and you might take notes in a OneNote, and then you'll jump to a team meeting that you're expected to go run. But again, that's maybe just a Zoom call that you're going to be on, and you might have a notepad somewhere. You wrote down the bullet points of the agenda. But like, my point is, like, if you don't actually make tools that help you think about augmenting the way that your managers actually spend their time and start from there versus start from the scavenger hunt, it actually changes the mindset a little bit. And so I kind of equate this to, back when it was about 10 years or so ago, I was working at kind of a large manufacturing company, and it's like, 100,000 people. And we'd go into a conference room, and on the wall, you'd have, the values printed, and it would be, company values in the conference room. The problem though is that those values don't help you actually run a better meeting. Like, they don't actually help you, keep the meeting from going 15 minutes over, or from, not talking about the right topics. And so there's just a level of, I think, trying to go one level deeper on these things from playbooks to actually, how do you just give better tools? And structure is part of it, but the tools that we're lacking as we retool for this new environment of how to think about working differently today in this virtual remote environment, how do you think about the tools that you need to make that easier? So I do think that's the kind of the next step of this.
I've definitely been seeing many, many tools being developed. When you look at the patents, for example, for virtual work, remote work, hybrid work, there are more and more tools being developed, which is a good sign for making this work easier. So what is your vision? What do you think will happen? What kind of tools are needed in the future? And what do you think the future will be like? So paint me a vision of where you think will be 2-3 years from now, with the kind of tools, or ideally where would be forward-looking companies. Where will they be? What kind of tools are they using? What is that future like? So as we finish up the conversation.
Yeah, well, I mean, first, as you can imagine, I'm obviously very bullish on the stickiness that will come with distributed and flexible workplace, right? I mean, all the data suggests that we're at somewhere around the 50%-ish kind of plateau of companies that will basically be some level of that for, I imagine, quite a while. So if you start from that standpoint and you realize that we have to just invest in how to work differently in that environment, then I think what's going to happen is that we will have to go address this challenge that, again, we observe kind of blatantly, which is we call it just team ops. And the team ops is like this space that I think has been unaddressed for too long. And it's in the middle of managing the work and managing people. And they're not discretely different things in the minds of a manager, because that's every day for you. You're trying to go keep both of those things in balance. And there's oftentimes tension there. And I think that tension, we were able to stomach it when we were in person, because you kind of got some minimum viable culture and minimum viable structure just because you were together. But when we don't do that intentionally and create space for that in remote, I think it's really challenging. So the future of the space for me feels like we're going to create an environment finally where, if you are in charge of managing a distributed set of work, of projects, of people, and your physical location does not matter, it's going to be a different way to think about the operational tools that actually make it easier to bring context from all the other things that you're otherwise being stretched thin through, and having those actually more intelligently aggregate around the way you actually run your team. There's obviously aspects of where I think AI matters in there. But again, it's not widgets. It's actually, you've got to create an operational context that lets those things even live in the first place. And so that's a big part of our vision where we think this actually matters, is can you put the right framework in place so that when we talk about augmentation from things like AI, they're doing it as assistive technologies to help promote a space that we think needs to be a healthier team operations push versus just purely, AI is here, people are gone. Like that's not how this is going to work. So,
excellent. And can you share with folks where they can find more information about you?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Anyone who wants to know more about Trelliswork, you can visit our website at trelliswork.com. Anyone, we're currently live in beta. You can join and try it out for yourself. We basically try to make it easier for you to do the basics of what we call team ops. Something from managing your agendas to running one-on-ones to making sure that culture has a place to actually live, and then also just sharing your work because, again, it doesn't happen for free. So make it easier. And I think that's helping companies run better, high-performing teams.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing your expertise, Mike. That was very helpful.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Gleb.
And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you checked out the show and leave a review. It helps others discover the show and it helps us improve the show. All right, everyone. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. In the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.